Every wild animal carries a threat assessment running constantly in the background. Speed of approach, direction, eye contact. The calculation happens faster than thought, and the output is almost always the same: get away from the human. This is not instilled through learning, it runs in species that have never encountered a human before. Tested in controlled conditions, this has been confirmed across dozens of wildlife studies. The threat response to humans appears to be encoded at a level deeper than individual experience. It is inherited. When we rescue a trapped animal, cutting the net, pulling it from the mud, freeing it from the snare, we tend to assume the animal understands what's happening. The research suggests otherwise. Something else is going on, and scientists who have spent careers studying it are still working out what to call it. Start with what being trapped does to the body. The moment a wild animal loses the ability to move, its physiology enters a state with no real human equivalent. Cortisol saturates the bloodstream. Adrenaline climbs to levels that would be lethal if sustained for more than a few minutes. Heart rate doubles, then doubles again. A study in the European Journal of Wildlife Research found that ungulates caught in fencing show higher cortisol concentrations than animals injured by gunshot or struck by vehicles higher than being shot. The body is burning through every reserve it has, running every emergency system at once. Doing what animals have done in moments like this for longer than the species has existed, waiting to die, or fighting until it can't. From the outside, this state has a specific look. Pupils fully dilated, muscles rigid, not tense the way a nervous animal is tense, but locked, the way a body locks when it has committed everything to a single outcome. The mouth may open slightly. Breathing becomes shallow and very fast. Wildlife rehabilitators describe it as the animal going somewhere else, still present in the body, but no longer attending to anything that isn't the immediate threat. When a human walks toward a trapped animal, the animal doesn't read rescuer. It reads the arrival of an apex predator at the worst possible moment. This is why the thrashing gets worse the closer you get. The animal's threat system interprets proximity as the final phase of a hunt. It spends its last energy on the only response its history has ever given it. And then, in some of these encounters, something shifts. The animal goes still, not from exhaustion, something more deliberate than that. The shift is visible when it happens. Field researchers and wildlife rehabilitators who have seen it describe a specific transition. The rigid, locked body softens fractionally, the frantic motion stops, and the animal orients not away from the human, but toward them. It holds that position and watches. In December 2005, a crab fisherman found a female humpback whale tangled in rope lines 18 miles off San Francisco. The ropes were wrapped around her mouth, her pectoral fins, her tail. 12 crab traps, 90 pounds each, hung off her body and pulled her downward. She was fighting constantly just to keep her blowhole above the surface. A rescue team arrived within hours. 4 divers entered the water carrying curved knives, knowing a single reflexive movement from her tail could kill any of them. She stopped moving the moment they entered the water. For over an hour, she held position at the surface while the divers worked around her body. At several points, she repositioned herself, rotating, extending a fin, adjusting her angle in ways that gave the divers better access to the lines they were cutting. A 50-foot, 50-ton animal chose to hold still while strangers with knives worked across her body. The explanation researchers favor has to do with threat pattern recognition. A predator closing in moves fast, with aggression, closing distance in a direct line. That specific movement pattern is what a trapped animal's alarm system has been calibrated to detect across millions of years of evolution. A human trying to help moves differently, slowly, without sudden gestures, touching the trap instead of the animal, producing no sounds that match anything in the threat catalog. The brain searches its entire library of threat signatures and comes back empty. With no recognized pattern to respond to, the crisis response stalls. The animal waits. A research team found a wolf in a leg hold trap. The wolf lunged and snapped at every approach, exactly what the biology predicts. One researcher stopped moving and held eye contact with the animal without looking away. Eye contact between predator and prey carries specific weight in mammal communication. A predator approaching to kill does not typically hold steady eye contact. It watches the prey's movement, tracks the body, calculates. Sustained direct eye contact that doesn't accompany aggression or movement is a signal that sits outside the standard predator threat template. Some researchers believe it may read as a form of social engagement rather than a hunt posture. The animal's alarm system, already searching for a pattern that matches a predator, encounters something it wasn't built to classify. After several minutes, the wolf stopped lunging. It sat down. It held the eye contact back. When the team began working on the trap, the wolf watched their hands. When the trap released, it stood still for a moment, looked directly at the researcher, then walked into the tree line. Field researchers describe this as a suspension of threat response rather than anything more loaded. The alarm system doesn't switch off, it loses its anchor point. The expected sequence of predator behavior never arrives, and the crisis response has nothing to lock onto. The harder question is, what happens after the trap opens? When the last rope was cut from the humpback off the Farallon Islands, she swam in wide circles around the divers before surfacing beside each one individually, nudging them with the tip of her jaw one by one before moving to the next. One of the divers described it to the San Francisco Chronicle as feeling like gratitude. Scientists are careful with that word. Humpbacks do interact with divers in certain conditions, and behavior following extreme physiological stress is hard to interpret cleanly. But humpback whales have spindle neurons, the same specialized brain cells found in humans, great apes, and elephants, associated with empathy and rapid social decision-making. These cells were long assumed to exist only in primates. The whale has the neurological architecture for the kind of processing that moment would require. Whether she used it that afternoon off San Francisco is something the data can't settle. Juvenile elephants pulled from mud pits in Kenya have been documented, making physical contact with the people who freed them trunk to hand, trunk to arm before walking away. The trunk contact is significant. An elephant's trunk is its primary sensory organ. It contains more than 40,000 individual muscles and carries a density of nerve endings comparable to human fingertips. When an elephant extends its trunk to touch something deliberately, it is not a casual gesture, it is an examination. Researchers in elephant rescue contexts have noted that the animals sometimes hold the contact for several seconds, the trunk resting against the rescuer's arm or hand before withdrawing. The touch is slow and appears deliberate in a way that distinguishes it from reactive contact. Elephants mourn their dead, recognize themselves in mirrors, and carry social memories across decades. They have been observed returning to the bones of deceased companions and touching them with their trunks, family members sometimes dead years before. The cognitive equipment to distinguish between a human who caused harm and one who ended it is not something elephants are missing. Some researchers go further. They point out that elephants in documented rescue situations have been observed staying close to the humans who freed them for longer than any threat suspension explanation requires. The threat is gone. The animal is free. There is no biological reason to remain. And yet, several documented cases show elephants standing near their rescuers for minutes after release, not fleeing, not grazing, simply present before eventually moving away. The honest answer to whether animals know when a human is trying to help them is that we genuinely don't know. What the data shows is that certain animals, elephants, wolves, measurably suspend their threat response when a calm human works around them without escalating. What happens post-rescue in some of these animals includes orienting toward the rescuer, making deliberate contact, and behaviors that serve no obvious survival function. What the data cannot reach is the inside of those encounters, what it is to be the wolf standing at the tree line watching the people who freed it walk back to their vehicles. What the whale was doing when she moved from diver to diver in that cold water. Whether any of it meant something to her or whether we find meaning in these moments because we are also animals running pattern recognition, and the pattern we keep finding is ourselves. There is a version of this question that science will eventually answer more precisely. The tools are getting better: neuroimaging, long-term behavioral tracking in elephant populations, more rigorous documentation protocols in wildlife rescue. The data will accumulate. Some of what is currently uncertain will become clearer. The researchers who study this most carefully hold the question open. The animals don't answer.